And we're back. Welcome, Simon, and welcome, James. It is so wonderful to have you here to reflect with us on our conversation that we just had earlier today with a wonderful group of people. So, Simon, I'm going to start with you. James gave us a lot of food for thought. What did you think?
Yeah, I loved it. I think it was really one of these sessions which, at least for me personally, gave me lots of food for thought and I think new concepts. And also, I mean, it was, for people who have been following us for a while, it was one of these requested sessions, like James Frith from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, BloombergNEF has been requested multiple times before. So we knew we were in for a treat. And, I've been following you for some time, so it's always fantastic to see your work. And yeah, for me, really, what really stuck with me was your kind of anecdote in a way, how we started off the session with lithium really being the new oil and kind of talking about the geopolitical situation. Also, of course, very, time sensitive right now with Afghanistan, but also all around the world, how this kind of, also kind of changes maybe the perspective on the raw materials to lithium and how lithium-ion batteries and how crucial they are. So James, good to have you here also in the review and the reflection. Any thoughts from your side on the session?
Yeah, perfect. And great to be here. And thanks for kind of inviting me to the session itself. It was really kind of fun to take part. And I think, my first note is actually from my side of things, first time for using Clubhouse. So I feel like I've kind of been brought into the future again. I feel like maybe I was getting left behind slightly. So good to kind of take part in that. Like kind of lots of things to take away. I suppose the two things that probably stick out is this question that actually comes up a lot at the moment when you're talking to some of the cell manufacturers in Europe is, actually one of the biggest difficulties we're probably going to face over the next kind of 5 or 10 years when it comes to kind of supply chains full stop and raw materials is actually how big is demand going to be? Are we going to kind of outstrip, where we expect it's going to be or perhaps actually and this is what people don't talk about, perhaps on the other side, perhaps demand is going to be lower. I think I'm probably on the more bullish side, but we'll wait and test that theory. And then actually one of the kind of points that came up in the discussion afterwards on second life batteries, and I think it's just as we were getting to the end of it, and just this question on even, will there be a second life industry? And people are pretty vocal on that at the moment. I think you have two camps and you're either one or the other. I feel like I'm in the minority trying to sit on the fence. So we'll see how that develops as well.
Yeah, the past 2 years, my work in batteries has actually been focused on second life. So causing a bit of a giggle here. No, it's so funny. The dilemma is definitely real. I used to sit in the minority as well, but when you're around a group of people who fall in a particular camp, you end up kind of understanding their point of views a lot more. But no, that's interesting for sure. I'm going to come clean. Like, I love that you were talking about everything right now going on geopolitically. My background's actually international relations before it was batteries. So funny that batteries, I can even consider that part of my background now. So international relations is really important. Obviously, it plays a huge role in batteries, in supply chain, in security of supply chain. And there's just a lot coming out right now about what the resources available in Afghanistan are beyond lithium as well. And it just seems like all of a sudden, everybody's talking about this country from so many different dynamics, perspectives. It's all of a sudden become very critical for like so many industries. And maybe it's been the case all along, but I will say like that has not come up in the past 2 to 3 years for me, whether it's been for batteries or other industries such as pharmaceuticals. What are your thoughts and what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on like the current situation and like what we in the battery industry need to be looking out for as this situation like pans out? I mean, so much of this will happen in like business meetings now and all. And I imagine that, it's going to be an extensive conversation, but I don't know, any like current, very much in the moment thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, my first thought that there is like actually coming from an international relations perspective and then coming into the battery industry is pretty cool. I think that's definitely relevant and goes back to, one of the other discussion points just around, if you want to get into the battery industry, what should you do? And actually it's that thing of like, increasingly everything's going to be part of the battery industry.
Just start reading. Just start reading. Join conversations like this.
No, definitely. And I mean, actually, yeah, to your point, it is kind of odd that this resource question in Afghanistan hasn't come up until suddenly everyone's pulling out and they're like, well, what about the resources? But, I think for the battery industry, the potential of having lithium in Afghanistan, is not a kind of short-term thing anyway. To develop those resources, you're looking kind of years down the line. But I think it touches on the broader context really in the battery industry around the ethics of procuring raw materials, whether it's if it was lithium that was coming from Afghanistan, or as we've seen in the past with cobalt. And I think more broadly as well, that there's a push nowadays to try and and I'm sure this goes beyond just the battery industry that I'm less aware of, but to try and not just kind of pillage raw materials from a country and take it somewhere else to add value. We've seen in Indonesia where they've brought in export bans on nickel so that they can add more value in country and bring more of the kind of value from those supply chains that nickel serves to their to Indonesia. We saw a kind of failed attempt, I guess, with lithium in Chile, where the Chilean government offered kind of lower royalty fees if companies were buying lithium and then kind of converting it to cathode material within the country. There were a couple of companies who put forward plans for that, and actually kind of nothing's come so far. But I think from many angles, really kind of going to the lithium-ion battery industry could also be about leveling up kind of globally, and not necessarily just taking the raw materials and taking it somewhere else. We could make this a much more sustainable value chain and a much more ethical value chain. And I think we'll probably see some companies doing that. I think kind of when it comes to perhaps making the lowest cost batteries for the most cost sensitive applications, you won't focus on that. But hopefully we start to see a kind of a range of approaches there, and kind of companies, particularly the automotive companies, considering the kind of ESG criteria, more generally as part of the offering that they have for EVs. But perhaps, I suspect maybe I'm overstepping my mark as a battery scientist here, and you can rebuke some of those comments.
No, it's totally fine. I think all good food for thought, and a good, it's actually literally good food for thought, right? Rather than the way, I think the perspective you're bringing is how do we keep it sustainable? How do we not, and that just doesn't apply only to Afghanistan, but across the world, as we find and identify areas with certain types of resource, how do you kind of pay it back within that community and support that effort? So, no, I appreciate it. Any thoughts on that, Simon, or?
Yeah, no, I just want to really appreciate this, these examples also with Indonesia. And I think it's something which, I think building up a localized supply chain and really, creating value locally, I think it's one of our, which I think is really also deeply rooted in our work with battery associates, right? To kind of train people around the world, in the battery MBA, I think so far we're over 25 to 30 countries. So, we have people participating, and really the idea can be, support people also through scholarships, et cetera, locally. And the same thing also, knowledge, but also tools. We have a couple of things to be announced. Also have a battery map we have been developing, essentially trying to map all of these different things, really trying to democratize some of these information and knowledge, and really trying to, create also and we have local resources, right? And I think in people, as we also discussed, and I think it's just what always really humbles me is kind of all these, amazing people joining these sessions, and we're just so excited to learn and so excited to be part of these solution and is part of this movement. And I think this is just something which always gets me optimistic, when you have these people jumping and saying, but how can we do this here in my country? And how can we do this there? And I think, as long as we ask these questions and we have these platforms to exchange different insights and, and views, I think, I see a lot of potential, and I think we're going to have a really exciting future all ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's been such an honor to be a part of that effort. I can't believe we're coming up on a year, but until then, I know we have a couple of more sessions lined up. Do you know where we're headed next?
Actually,
Battery Revolution?
Actually, I don't. So that's that's one. It's gonna keep exciting. Maybe, I mean, James, you don't have to answer, but if you have anyone you think, for example, you would think we should try. I mean, you know, it might take a bit longer than a week, but we always love to get recommendations from voices and from perspectives people like to hear from.
I mean, I'm sure there's a few people I could kind of throw out there. I mean, off the top of my head, and I don't know if they've done sessions even. You know, Matt Lacey at Scania has lots of thoughts on the battery industry. Ulderico Ulissi from Nissan as well. Then if we go over the pond to the US, you know, Venkat certainly is doing some interesting things on the aerospace industry at the moment. You know, and kind of plenty more I think we could jump into. I think the other thing to add is, I mean, it's impressive as well, kind of like doing this for 31 weeks. It shows kind of how much there is going on in the battery industry, how much exciting stuff there is to talk about. And I have a feeling that, you know, there's probably going to be many years of this to come. I think luckily, I always feel lucky in the battery industry that, you know, there are kind of 2-year development cycles for new technology, and that doesn't seem to be slowing down yet. You know, we're seeing more and more kind of interesting things coming out of the industry, which gives me something to talk about, you know, you guys something to talk about. And then, as we said, kind of the battery industry is touching on kind of more and more aspects of society, no longer just kind of battery scientists and miners. You know, it's now kind of international politics and kind of going into the sustainability and the ESG worlds as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. And I think with this, you know, I think we're going to wrap it up for today because of time, even though I know we would love to talk much longer. And
I know, I feel like this conversation could continue. Okay. But yes.
Next week.
Until next week.
All
right. Bye.
Bye-bye.